Port Charles was buzzing with tension after whispers spread about an unexpected confrontation at Wyndemere. What began as a quiet evening at the historic estate quickly turned into a moment that left several key figures in shock. Brick had arrived at Wyndemere with a clear purpose. He had recently uncovered information suggesting that a hidden alliance was forming behind the scenes, one that could shift the balance of power in Port Charles. Rather than confront the issue through back channels, Brick chose a direct approach, believing that secrets only grow more dangerous when left in the dark. Inside the grand halls of Wyndemere, tensions rose as Ava realized Brick wasn't there for a social visit. His calm but firm demeanor made it clear he was prepared to expose what he knew. As their conversation unfolded, it became obvious that Brick had connected dots others had overlooked. His presence alone forced uncomfortable truths into the open. Unbeknownst to them, others had taken notice of Brick's arrival. Word traveled fast, and soon curiosity drew several familiar faces closer to Wyndemere. Each person suspected that whatever was happening inside could have ripple effects across Port Charles. Brick's bold choice to bring matters into the light forced everyone involved to reconsider their next steps. Trust was questioned, alliances were reevaluated, and long-buried motives began surfacing. By the time the evening ended, it was clear that Wyndemere had once again become the stage for a turning point in the town's ongoing drama. The aftermath left Port Charles on edge. Rumors swirled about what Brick had discovered and how it might change relationships moving forward. For some, it was a warning. For others, it was an opportunity to protect themselves before the truth spread further. One thing was certain, Brick's decision to act openly had shifted the atmosphere in Port Charles, and as the dust settled, everyone wondered what the next revelation might bring. The next morning, Wyndemere felt unusually still, as if the old estate itself were holding its breath. Ava replayed every word Brick had said the night before, searching for clues she might have missed. His calm certainty had unsettled her more than any accusation could. It wasn't what he said, it was how sure he was. Across town, the whispers had already reached the Metro Court. Carly and Olivia compared notes after hearing fragments of the story from different sources. Neither of them had the full picture, but they both sensed the same thing. Brick wouldn't have gone to Wyndemere without solid proof. Whatever he uncovered had to be significant. Meanwhile, Brick met privately with Sonny. He didn't reveal everything at once, choosing instead to lay out the situation piece by piece. Sonny listened carefully, his expression tightening as the implications became clear. If Brick's information was accurate, then someone in Port Charles had been carefully positioning themselves for a move that could affect several families at once. At the hospital, Laura found herself fielding subtle questions from people trying to piece together the puzzle. As mayor, she was used to calming public concerns, but this felt more personal. Wyndemere had always been tied to complicated histories, and she worried that old wounds might reopen if the truth came out too abruptly. Back at the estate, Ava received an unexpected visitor. The look on their face told her they had heard the rumors too. Their quiet warning confirmed her fears. Brick's visit had set off a chain reaction, and people were already choosing sides without fully understanding the situation. By afternoon, Port Charles felt divided. Some believed Brick had done the right thing by forcing transparency. Others felt his approach might create unnecessary fallout, but no one could deny that something important was unfolding. As the evening approached, Brick made another decision. He began reaching out to a select few people he trusted, preparing them for what might come next. He knew the truth would surface soon, whether through careful planning or by accident. And as the sun set over Port Charles, a quiet tension settled over the town. Everyone sensed that the next revelation wouldn't stay contained within the walls of Wyndemere. It was only a matter of time before the full story reached the rest of Port Charles, changing relationships in ways no one could predict.
The tension that had started at Wyndemere had spread through nearly every corner of Port Charles. Conversations lowered to whispers whenever someone new entered a room. No one had the full story, but everyone felt the weight of something approaching. Brick arranged a small, discreet meeting at the Metro Court with a handful of people he trusted. He didn't dramatize what he had learned. Instead, he laid out a careful timeline, events, conversations, and connections that painted a picture of quiet maneuvering behind the scenes. As the pieces came together, those listening began to realize how long this plan had been unfolding without their notice. One detail stood out. Several recent misunderstandings between families in Port Charles weren't coincidences. They had been subtly encouraged, nudged along by someone who benefited from keeping others distracted and divided. The realization left the group stunned. Long-standing tensions suddenly looked less like personal conflicts and more like part of a larger design. At Wyndemere, Ava began to understand why Brick had seemed so certain. She revisited old messages, past meetings, and overlooked moments that now carried new meaning. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Someone had been carefully influencing situations from the shadows, never stepping into the spotlight. Laura, concerned about the growing unease in town, reached out to Brick directly. Their conversation was calm but serious. She urged him to be thoughtful about how the truth came out. Port Charles had been through enough upheaval, and a careless reveal could fracture already fragile relationships. Meanwhile, the person at the center of Brick's discovery sensed the shift. They noticed the change in how people spoke to them, the subtle distance in once friendly conversations. Though no one had accused them outright, the atmosphere made it clear that suspicion was building. As night fell again, Brick stood by the waterfront, reflecting on what to do next. He knew the truth had power, not just to expose wrongdoing, but to heal misunderstandings if handled carefully. His goal had never been to create chaos. It was to stop it before it went further. Back across town, Ava received another message, one that confirmed her fears. The hidden strategist was preparing to make a move of their own before Brick could speak publicly. Port Charles was now caught in a quiet race between the truth coming to light and someone trying to stay one step ahead of it. A restless energy settled over Port Charles as the day unfolded. People moved through their routines, but their minds were elsewhere, replaying rumors and half-heard conversations. The sense that something decisive was about to happen made even ordinary moments feel charged. Brick chose his next step carefully. Rather than call attention to the situation, he invited a few key figures to a private gathering at the Quartermain estate. His intention wasn't to accuse anyone publicly, but to present what he had learned in a controlled setting where emotions could be managed and facts could speak for themselves. As the guests arrived, they immediately sensed the seriousness of the meeting. Familiar faces exchanged cautious glances. No one wanted to be the first to ask why they had been summoned, but everyone suspected it traced back to Wyndemere. When Brick began speaking, he kept his tone steady. He walked them through a sequence of events, miscommunications, sudden conflicts, unexpected decisions, that when viewed together revealed a deliberate pattern. It became clear that someone had quietly benefited from keeping influential people at odds with one another. Ava listened closely, her expression tightening as she recognized moments she had once dismissed as coincidence. Laura remained composed, though concern showed in her eyes. Others in the room began to realize how easily they had been steered without noticing. Then came the turning point. Brick revealed evidence that connected the pattern to a single source, someone who had been present at key moments but never under suspicion. A hush fell over the room as the realization settled in. The name itself wasn't spoken aloud yet, but several people reached the same conclusion at once. Before anyone could respond, a message arrived for one of the guests. It was brief but alarming. The person they were all thinking of had abruptly left town earlier that afternoon. The timing said everything. A mix of relief and frustration swept through the room. The truth had surfaced, but the person responsible had slipped away before facing the consequences. Still, the damage they tried to create was now undone by awareness. The misunderstandings they had fueled began to unravel as people spoke honestly for the first time in weeks. As the gathering ended, a quiet understanding formed among them. Trust would need rebuilding, but at least now they knew the source of the division. Later that night, Brick stood outside the estate, watching as the last car pulled away. He knew this wasn't the end of the story. The one who had left Port Charles would likely return someday, and when they did, they would find a town no longer easy to manipulate. For now, however, Port Charles could breathe again, aware, united, and a little wiser than before.